I've grown to depend on Nan, and I don't know where she is, but I realized that the Zoom meeting hadn't even started yet. So I started it and started that thing. An interesting thing for those who speak. If you do this and like you're looking at something up close, it's a screen.
Oh, God.
It picks it up and look what happened. You want just your eye on the internet for the whole world to see. You can tell if you have cataracts or not. Deep peace of the running wave to you, of the flowing air to you, of the quiet earth to you, and of the sunny day to you. Deep peace of the gentle night to you, of the shining stars to you, pouring all their light on you. But most of all, the Christ within gives you peace. So the deep peace described in this poem, then, is the Christ within. So you might ask your question, what is the purpose of the deep peace? Why do we seek it? Well, its function, as far as I can tell, is to heal, to bring peace, to bring an end to the turmoils and problems in your heart. From a scientific point of view, it reorganizes your brain. It erases and clears up and heals those things that are traumatic memories that you can't let go of. It's God's gift to us to be able to overcome these things and to realize our true nature, which is joy, happiness, love. We're not meant to be angry and frustrated and fussy. Those are things that have gone wrong, wiring that's gone across. So deep peace takes care of this. And that's actually, I can sit down because that's my whole lesson. But I have a story, a lovely story by Hans Christian Andersen. So you know, he doesn't tell nice stories. The ones we hear are the ones where they fixed. And not told the whole story. But anyways, this is a man in his shadow, and the man moved south. He's in the north. He moves down in the south country where the sun is hot and the shadows are dark, almost black. And he's sitting in his apartment upstairs and looking out from his balcony, and he sees the balcony just across the way. And he's, by the way, where he's at in this country, like, they're not streets like we have. They're just room for a cart. So there's only 10 feet between his balcony and the other balcony, really. And there's a lady there, a beautiful young lady, and she's arranging some beautiful flowers. And he goes, oh, I wish I could go over and talk to her, but I'm so shy. Well, one evening, when it was the candle was burning in the room behind him and casting his shadow outward onto the balcony across the way where the young lady lived. And he says to his shadow, so shadow, I'm too afraid to go and talk to her, but you go ahead, you do it. You go talk to the girl. And so the shadow did. He left the man and went across the street. And he thought that was unusual, and he was surprised, but he accepted that. And presently he grew another shadow and then moved back north to his home. And he lived, and he became middle-aged, but he wasn't much of a success. Just kind of moseying along through life. One day his shadow showed up, and he was rather thin and dressed elegantly and had a swarthy walk to him, you know, the kind. And oh, he'd been out and seen the world, and now he's come back. And the first thing the man says, well, did you get in that, you know, building across the way? Did you talk to the young lady? Oh yes, I did. Well, what did you see? And oh yes, I saw everything. It was all there. And you know, the man kind of suspects that he maybe didn't even go there. So he goes, well, did it look like the stars shining bright at the top of a mountain. And Shadow says, oh yes, that's what I saw. Absolutely, it's all there. And so, well, time goes on, and the Shadow had come, or was a rather unscrupulous being, and quite versed in the arts of blackmail and such. And it ended up that he dominated the man completely, and they went traveling. The Shadow as master and the man as servant. Well, this is kind of odd, but this is what happened. In their travels, he ran into a princess. The princess saw the Shadow and didn't see a shadow. She didn't trust him. Oh, how come you don't have a shadow? And the Shadow says, oh, well, there's my shadow. I have allowed him to walk freely in the world. And she goes, oh, she accepted that being a logical thing to think. And time went on, and the Shadow and the princess decided to get married. They were going to get married. And the man at last rebelled. He's going to go to the princess and tell her the truth. But the Shadow got there first, and he says, oh, I hate to say this, but this shadow of mine, he thinks he's a man and that I'm his shadow. And the princess says, oh my goodness, you've got to be kidding me. How horrible. Yes. Well, I think mercy killing is in order. And so while the princess and the Shadow are married, they execute the man. Now, that's a rather cruel story. It's about insanity and humiliation ending in death. But Hans Christian Andersen, that's right up his alley. You've read very many of his stuff. I have a collection of, it's this thick. They're wonderful. So let's take an interpretation of this story. The simple interpretation would be that, well, the Shadow is not the man. He's not capable of discernment. And yet the man allows his Shadow to go out into the world and tell him what the world is all about. That doesn't seem very logical or useful, but that's what happened. And so the Shadow in this story represents our perception. Our perception is unreliable, inaccurate, inconclusive. There's a quote here from Joseph Pearson. Ron isn't here. This is from one of his favorite books. None of us exercises our logical social thinking as a blank slate or as a photographic plate, seeing what is actually there. There is no pure looking with naked, innocent eye. Okay. Now, my mom, bless her, we were just talking about this morning. She lived in my house the last 5 years of her life. She died at 100, so she was 98 when this story takes place. And I think, that was actually very, very nice for her because she loved being around her grandchildren. She did so many things with them those 5 years, right there. And when she was getting rather old, and my mom was a visionary person. She was always seeing things. And so she looks out into the front room. We're all there. And we don't have a TV, so that wasn't going on. We were playing games and talking and things. And she says, I see flames. We all stop and look at her. Does anyone else see flames? No, Grandma, no one else sees them. Oh, just me. Well, am I looking into heaven? Are there flames in heaven? She's on her love seat. I go over to her to sit down next to her, and I put my arm around her. No, Mom, flames. That's the other place. And she's 98, and she got it. She kept her wit about her right up to the last moment almost. She still could understand my droll sense of humor. Poor, she got even with me plenty of times. So flames are just flames. It's our perception that makes them into heaven or hell. They're just flames. She saw flames. She was trying to make a story up about it. Laying her shadow, he'll tell the story. Let's talk about death. When someone dies, we grieve. Mourning is what we do to overcome the grieving. It's the work we do to overcome the pain. Now, I found a wonderful explanation for this. Grief this is what happens. Your mind has made a map of reality. So you know what's going on. You know what's what, where is what. You know everything is going on. The mind makes a map. This is what Pierce was saying, that you're not seeing the world really. You're seeing the world through a map, and that's it. You don't see the world as a photographic plate. You're seeing it through your mind's perception, a map. But if reality changes, the mind does not like change. And so if someone dies and your life no longer has this person in it, the reality is this person is gone. The map, which is resilient to change, is saying this person is still here. So every time a memory comes up of you being with this person that's gone, you feel pain, which we call grief. And this pain is caused by the map not being able to change. So the process of mourning then is to help us change the map so we can live. I remember watching Inga when her husband died. And I remember a comment she said, well, it's taken a while, but now I've adjusted to a life without my husband. So she had made the change. Her map had been rewritten. What else could this shadow represent? Well, Dr. Young, the famous shadow analogy, says that the shadow is all those things that are painful for us that we don't want to face. And so we push them down and away, and it gets stuck down in our subconscious mind where they fester. And so let's see, fester, I like this here. Well, yes, where they set about fulfilling the job of saboteur, wreaking havoc on our life when we least expect it. Huh? Does this happen? If memory comes up and all of a sudden you're angry, or whatever. So last week, Johanna talked to us. That was lovely, very lovely. She reminded us that God is love, unconditional love, and that we, the typical human, have conditional love. Well, what is conditional love, and why are we stuck with that? The conditional love is another word for just saying we've got a shadow stuck down in there that needs healing. We've got traumatic experiences that have made problems in our subconscious that need healing. And this is where the pain comes from. This is where our conditioning comes from. If we can get rid of that, we wouldn't have conditional love. We would have unconditional love. There's another analogy. The tree of life is a symbol that Don Miguel Ruiz, the writer of the book, The Four Agreements, he has one called the Tree of the Book of Knowledge or something like this, and it's his fourth book. And he says, everyone, when you're born, when you start learning things, you start getting beliefs, and you start adjusting to our social structure, you get a tree of life growing up inside of you. The tree of life is actually in us. It's part of our psyche, and every branch represents a memory or an occasion that we had, and some of them are unpleasant, and these unpleasant ones cause trauma, and it messes with our brain. So he's to make it really pointed towards the tree of life. He says, as soon as that tree is grown inside you, the Prince of Lies appears, and you can hear his voice very loudly, just in the same way that Adam and Eve were troubled with this in the garden. Charles Fillmore, this is a Unity church, and so he actually had something to say about this. He has a term called error consciousness, which I find very useful. What do you think error consciousness is? Same. It's our traumatized, damaged brain, psyche, consciousness. It's an error. And what's the solution? To awaken the Christ consciousness. Error consciousness becomes Christ consciousness. So how do we do this? Oh, I'm going to back up a little. I got a list here. Oh, I can't miss my list. So a mind that is an error will feel judgment, hatred, grief, pain, sadness, frustration. So any of these feelings feel familiar to you? when we heal these things and we awaken, the Christ consciousness is there. It's just being covered up by these errors. The error consciousness, when it's healed, you automatically feel the other. You will be able to forgive, to love, to be at peace. This is the Christ shining through. Now, there's Unity's steps of prayer, and I did quite a bit of studying over those years, preparing to be a minister for Unity. And I never did like the 5 steps of prayer until I found, until I read it in, and I can't pronounce her name, so I have to look for it. Where is her name? Linda Martella Witsets. There's one of those last names that has a dash in. I never could understand why it's going on. But anyways, Linda, we just call her Linda. Her description of the 5 steps of prayer for Unity really got to me, because it's exactly my experience with prayer, what she described. So I like to read her. There's a reason. Interesting. The 5 steps of prayer, especially as she describes them, mimic the steps of meditation that the Buddhists teach. And there's a reason for this. Charles Fillmore studied Buddhism. He studied it a lot. So of course, Buddhist teachings are going to show up in Unity's teachings. Here's the quote from the book by Linda. Meditation as a phase of prayer centers you in the heart of your heart, your divine identity, in a deep and restful silence. Here, in a non-time, non-space reality, your personal sense of self recedes. This reality is indescribable. Turns out that the 3rd step of prayer isn't a step of prayer at all. It's a result of doing steps 1 and 2 well enough, long enough, thorough enough, whatever it takes to get the work done. And what is the work? The silence heals the trauma, the damage, the error consciousness, the conditional love. It heals it and turns it into light of Christ. And so steps 1 and 2 create the mystical experience, which is steps 3 and 4. Let me emphasize. So let me state this more clearly. The silence, this is my opinion from personal experience. And I think Donna will agree. She's talked about this. The silence isn't something you do. You surrender to the process. You seek ways to allow the silence to emerge from your consciousness and overtake you. It's there. You just have to allow it to come forward. It's a different take on it. So Emmanuel, the teacher, says, in the act of surrender, there can be no forcing. Willing a release makes the release tighter because it does not yield to will, it yields to yielding. What in the world can that mean? Can't do it. Can't force it. Can't make it. You really can't. You allow it. And if you allow the silence to overtake you without effort, without further work, without further arguments with the universe or with your soul, the silence will take those parts of you that are clouding your Christ consciousness and remove them. This is the cosmic promise. This is what happens. This is what Charles is trying to say. He said that what Jesus experienced, what he did, is exactly the same thing that's available to us. And the only thing standing in our way is our error consciousness. That's not a direct quote, but that's pretty close to what he said. Here's another quote from John West, the minister of Unity of the Valley. And it is easy living this way because it's how we were meant to be. I don't struggle or strain. I get out of the way and I'm letting God live through me. So you, like the song says, I am the lion. You are the lion. There is a part of your soul, psyche, which is silent. It is a shaman, the inner healer, the soul, your soul's soul. Surrender to the silence and let the work of realizing your full potential for joy and happiness begin. And thank you for the meditation. Being the music director, you suspect I might have something musical. Let the music carry you away to help be a bridge, to carry you away, to connect this deep subconscious, unconscious part of yourself with the conscious. Usually, a minute or two isn't long enough, but maybe it is. On Mondays, we sit for 20 minutes in complete silence, and that's more effective. But here it is, a little music. Take some deep breaths. Be aware of your breath. You can't be anywhere except right in the moment, right now, when you're looking at your breath. Because breathing only takes place in the moment. Breathe deeply.
Great.